Here's Joe. Here's Joe staring creepily through a window. And here's Joe again, somehow managing to stare even creepier through a different window. This is Joe Goldberg from You. He looks like a charming bookworm, but in reality, he is the kind of guy who I'll buy you flowers and then also buy bolt cutters to break into your apartment. Today, we're cracking open Joe's brain to see why his obsession feels like love. If love also came with stalking, lies, and a couple of bodies in the basement. Welcome to Think Again, where we dig into the strange, dark, and downright fascinating corners of psychology, because human behavior is always weirder than fiction. Spoilers ahead for you, so if you're not caught up, go binge, ruin your sleep schedule, and come back when you're emotionally damaged like the rest of us. As much as we hate to admit it, Joe's got a type: smart, witty, independent women who don't take any crap. He's just like every bookish dreamboat on Instagram. He's charming, thoughtful, and can quote Virginia Woolf better than your ex ever could. But psychologists call what he does love bombing. Basically, it's when someone drowns you in attention and gifts until you mistake obsession for devotion. At first, it feels romantic. Then you realize every text he reads, every move he tracks, is just him building his own creepy Google Doc on you. Real love says, "I respect your space." Joe says, "I've already been in your apartment and I ate your leftovers." It's easy to dismiss Joe as just a misunderstood romantic. After all, he does seem to fall hard and fast for these women, but psychologists have a name for this: obsessive love disorder. Which sounds like a bad pop song, but is actually the point where love turns into a hostage situation. Joe doesn't just like his partners. He consumes them. Independent, confident women, he can't handle them. So he does what any totally normal guy would do: manipulates, gaslights, and slowly breaks them down until they're easier to control. This isn't devotion. It's psychological Home Depot. He's remodeling women to fit his fragile ego. But let's be real, we've all dated a guy like Joe. They shower you with gifts and compliments, tell you how amazing you are while also making you feel like you're doing something wrong. In Joe's case, he literally tells Candace, "You're perfect, but you have a lot of issues. Like how much you talk, which means you never listen. I need you to be my project." Not exactly boyfriend of the year material, but it's precisely this dynamic that makes Joe so scary and so relatable. He preys on the worst parts of us, the moments when we confuse infatuation with actual connection, when we overlook red flags because someone calls us beautiful, when we convince ourselves that our partner won't hurt us because they have eyes that look like melted chocolate. Joe's story is a cautionary tale about investing in a one-way street, a love that takes more than it gives, that controls rather than connects. In a world where Tinder bios say as much, it's easy to get lost in the noise. But Joe reminds us to look beyond the carefully curated Instagram versions of people, because sometimes the nicest guys have the darkest secrets, like murders. And it's not always obvious who's hiding what. And now for the next segment, we ask the wonderful people of Reddit, what was the scariest thing you learned about Joe? From stalker to sociopath, you had some interesting theories. Let's read some of them out. I read somewhere that he's a narcissist. He seems to use his victims to feed his own ego and needs constant validation. He uses terms like, "you complete me," or says things like, "you are the one," to justify his actions. Yeah, there were so many clues pointing to narcissism in Season 1. He has no empathy for others. He thinks that he is always right. He has a sense of entitlement and needs to be admired by others. All classic signs of a narcissist. Someone else said, Joe can't love anyone. He can only love the idea of someone. I really like this one because it highlights Joe's inability to form healthy connections. Instead, he becomes obsessed with the fantasy of love rather than actually experiencing it. He creates these idealized versions of the women he meets and then becomes infatuated with those imagined characters rather than the real people standing in front of him. This inability to connect on a deeper level and the subsequent devaluation of his partners is a hallmark of psychopathy. Let's read one more. One Reddit user said, Joe is a classic example of someone with obsessive love disorder, OLD. This disorder describes a person who becomes fixated on someone to the point of causing them harm. People with OLD often have a distorted view of their relationships and may become jealous and possessive towards their partners. As we discussed earlier, Joe exhibits all of these behaviors, making him the perfect example of someone with obsessive love disorder. So Joe's story is a chilling reminder to be cautious when dating. Don't be fooled by a charming facade. Look beyond the surface, and if someone's love feels more like a burden than a blessing, trust your gut and run away. Or at least lock your doors, because it's always the quiet ones you gotta watch out for. Just like Joe, they got nothing to hide. Oh wait, yes they do. Murders, secret basements, restraining orders. But hey, they look cute, so we tend to ignore all that. By now you've probably noticed that Joe's crimes are pretty heinous. Stalking, kidnapping, manipulation, murder. But what makes him tick? What drives him to commit these terrible acts? Well, according to experts, Joe suffers from what's called cognitive dissonance. When your actions don't match your morals, your brain rewrites the script. And Joe rewrites faster than a college kid on Adderall. He's not a murderer in his mind. He's basically Mother Teresa with a body count. Joe justifies his actions with rationalizations like Beck deserved it, or she'd be better off without her toxic friends, or she wouldn't have killed that other girl. He convinces himself that he's acting out of love, not selfishness. In fact, he sees himself as the hero of his story, saving these women from themselves or other villains. This way of thinking allows him to live with himself, or at least keeps him from spiraling into full-on villain mode. By crafting these alternate realities where he's the knight in shining armor, Joe manages to maintain his sanity. Well, relatively speaking, of course. But this raises an important question. Why do we root for him? Because, let's be real, despite all the red flags, we're kinda Team Joe too. Twitter's full of folks saying, he can stalk me anytime. Which, therapy, immediately. But the psychology checks out. Joe embodies the fantasy of being someone's everything. He places women on pedestals, worships their quirks, and makes them feel like the only person in the world. And we all want to feel special, wanted, and loved. That's the halo effect. If someone's hot and poetic, we excuse little red flags like, murder. It's the same reason people wrote love letters to Ted Bundy in prison. Charisma, plus cheekbones. People forget you're a sociopath. Joe's charisma is magnetic, drawing us into his world and making us question our own judgment. We start to see the world through his eyes, questioning whether the women he targets really are that bad. Are they toxic? Do they deserve Joe's special brand of love? It's a dangerous game, one that blurs the lines between obsession and devotion. But remember, real love doesn't need to be possessive, obsessive, or controlling. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and communication, not flowers, candles, and chains. So while Joe might seem like the ultimate catch, he's a reminder that what we see on the surface may not always be what we get. Beneath Joe's charming exterior lies a darkness that's both terrifying and all too human. He shows how obsession hides behind romance, how control dresses up as protection, and how easily charm blinds us to abuse. But perhaps the most unsettling part of Joe's story is that he's not just fiction. He's a reflection of the toxic relationships that exist in our real world. He reminds us that stalking and obsession are not romantic, that possessiveness is not endearing, and that love, above all, should set us free. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. And if you have a suggestion for a future video, leave it in the comments below.